When it comes to limit breaks, none are more recognisable or as well known as Omnislash. This move first appeared in Final Fantasy VII as the ultimate limit break for Cloud Strife. It was unreal, and due to its prominent place within the main story of Final Fantasy VII, everyone who completed the game would have been able to bear witness to its awesome power and the visual spectacle that came with it. It meant that even though the limit mechanic was technically introduced in Final Fantasy VI as desperation attacks, Final Fantasy VII projected it to another level, claiming the name and laying down a more solid foundation that almost every Final Fantasy game released since would build upon. Over the years, Omnislash has continued to play its part in that development, appearing as the ultimate move for Cloud Strife in numerous compilation titles and cameo appearances. But even though the move's name has largely stayed the same, what's surprising is that almost nothing else has. Developers have instead chosen to interpret Omnislash in many different ways, and throughout this video, we're going to be running through how Cloud Strife's limit break has developed in the decades that followed its first appearance, where interestingly it was given a rather different name for Japanese audiences. Playing on a traditional anime trope, instead of being called Omnislash, it was called something akin to Super Extreme Martial God Supreme Slash! And that actually ties in nicely with the sponsor of today's video, Crunchyroll. If you follow the link in the description to crunchyroll.com/FFunion, you can grab 14 days free of Crunchyroll Premium. That gives you access to anime with no ads in full 1080p HD, whether it's in your browser, on your gaming console, or even your mobile phone. And thanks to Crunchyroll's professionally translated subtitles, you won't be getting lines like, "This guy are sick," or the legendary, "You spoony bard." In truth, Lauren and I haven't watched all that much anime in recent times, but now with Crunchyroll, I've enjoyed catching up on Attack on Titan, and Lauren has been able to check out Sailor Moon Crystal. But if you've got any suggestions for other shows we should check out, leave them in the comments below. The list of shows available is pretty extensive, and it ranges from older and newer shows like Naruto, One Piece, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So go check out Crunchyroll Premium for free by heading to crunchyroll.com/FFunion via the link in the description below. Now, Omnislash first appeared in 1997, and if you wanted to use it before the final encounter with Sephiroth, it could be obtained from the Gold Source's Battle Square by spending a hefty chunk of BP. This first iteration of the move was colossal. It saw Cloud perform 15 consecutive strikes with no chance for a response from the enemy, and its damage was calculated based on Cloud's strength attribute, with each strike doing 0.75% of Cloud's normal damage, which made it less hindered than any of the other ultimate moves as they each had higher penalties. Omnislash also dealt automatic critical hits, doubling the damage of each strike. But to increase its maximum potential, you would need to push Cloud beyond his normal limits by using power sources. This would enable each strike to do 9,999 damage, culminating in 149,985 damage upon completion of the move, which was enough to defeat Safer Sephiroth in one foul swoop, assuming Sephiroth hadn't received any HP boosts due to your prior actions. Ironically, this wasn't the most powerful limit break in the game though, as without exploits, Highwind and Angamax could do 179,982 damage. But it shouldn't detract from the utility of Omnislash, as until characters were maxed out, it had the potential to do more damage due to its modifiers. Should you be squaring off against multiple enemies, Omnislash would also allow Cloud to cycle between them, with the move targeting enemies at random. But the strikes were always the same, and Omnislash would always end with a powerful downward strike. It made this first appearance pretty comprehensive, but when Cloud appeared in Final Fantasy Tactics some 140 days later, even though Omnislash was present, almost none of the elements were retained, and it wasn't even Cloud's ultimate move anymore. Within the context of the story, Cloud was able to appear within Tactics after being pulled from his own dimension. This explained his traditional appearance, his designation as the exclusive soldier job, and that his job command was named Limit. This command gave Cloud access to every single one of his limit breaks from Final Fantasy VII, as well as an even more powerful move called Cherry Blossom. But just unlocking the moves wasn't enough, as in order to perform them, Cloud would also need to have a specific weapon equipped, the Materia Blade, which in the original version of Tactics could only be found at the top of the Bernevia volcano by using the Treasure Hunter ability. Even though Omnislash was demoted to being Cloud's second most powerful move, it would have been expected that the move had similar performance to its original appearance, but its application was unrecognizable from what was seen within Final Fantasy VII. Instead of seeing Cloud strike random enemies 15 times, Omnislash was now a single strike move that affected all targets within a certain area. Its damage formula was also changed from being associated with strength to being associated with magic attack, and it also had a very slow charge time, which made it pretty useless.
Disappointed!
Unless you were fortunate, the AI would just plan around where it was intending to strike, and while it charged, Cloud was a sitting duck. It meant the use of Omnislash within Tactics was something of a novelty, as even if you did boost Cloud's speed in a significant manner, there were better alternatives available. The next appearance of Omnislash was in Ehrgeiz, which launched in Japanese arcades at the start of 1998. This game was meant to serve as the culmination of Dream Factory's collaboration with Square, and to ensure its success, alongside a host of original characters, numerous Final Fantasy VII characters were also included in the roster, with Cloud even appearing on the box art for its port to the PlayStation later that year. Unlike the two previous games in which Cloud had appeared, Ehrgeiz was a straight-up 3D fighting game. But that didn't stop the developers from including Omnislash, which appeared as Cloud's level 4 limit, just like in Final Fantasy VII. To work in with the game's mechanics, Omnislash was included as a throw that required a 360-degree joystick rotation while also pressing the high and low attack at the same time. If you were successful, Cloud would unleash Omnislash, which could hit up to 15 times, and just like in the original, it would finish with a powerful downward strike. Such was the power of the move that Omnislash would almost kill a full-strength opponent, but in a twist, it could be broken out of using blade catches, and like in Tactics, it could also just miss entirely. It meant this version of Omnislash was very faithful to what was seen within Final Fantasy VII, it just worked in with the game's more unique mechanics. But there was another trait that this iteration brought to the table. As Zack Fair's moveset was identical to Cloud's, Ehrgeiz saw the first time that someone else could use Omnislash, although Zack's version was renamed to Unseen Omnislash. It would be some years until Cloud made his next appearance, but when he surfaced as a supporting character in Kingdom Hearts, he had a brand new look and a brand new Omnislash. This move was positioned as Cloud's ultimate attack, and it would first be seen when fighting against Cloud in the Hercules Cup. After he was down to less than 50% health, Cloud would be able to start using Omnislash. This would make him invincible during the move, but as he was an enemy, its performance was nerfed. Like in the original, Omnislash would still hit various targets, and each strike received a damage boost, but now they were only up to 5 strikes as opposed to 15, and it lacked the big finishing blow. You could also evade Omnislash, making it a missable attack like in Tactics and Ehrgeiz, but the big change was that when performing the move, Cloud flew through the air. When Cloud reprised his role within Kingdom Hearts' Chain of Memories, Omnislash was changed again, but much of this was cosmetic, as from the perspective of mechanics, it still saw Cloud perform multiple strikes from the skies, and each strike received a damage boost, but it could still be evaded, and after obtaining Omnislash as a summon slate, it was enhanced, allowing Cloud to strike multiple targets. The next big evolution of Omnislash wouldn't arrive for another year, and such was the nature of the evolution that Omnislash would even be given a new name. This version appeared within Advent Children, and it was born from a desire within the production team to move on from the game that had preceded it. With the scope of the project increasing all the time, it was decided that even though Cloud used the Buster Sword within the pilot, within the final draft, he should leave it behind. After this decision was made, Cloud's legendary weapon was replaced with 6 brand new swords. Over time, this notion was expanded upon as the production team felt it would be cool to have the 6 swords fused together to make a singular sword that imitated the Buster Sword. This would become known as the Fusion Sword, and such was its importance that it was given heavy integration into the movie's grand finale. As Sephiroth appeared once again, Cloud surprised him by utilizing the unique construction of the Fusion Sword to perform Omnislash version 5, an attack so named because it was the 5th iteration of the attack that had been designed by the production team. Much like in Kingdom Hearts, this saw Cloud leap into the air to land multiple strikes on his opponent, and there was a big downward strike at its conclusion. But outside of it being unblockable for the first time since Final Fantasy VII, what made this variant unique was that it was the first time Omnislash had been performed with the use of multiple weapons. When Cloud then appeared in Kingdom Hearts 2 a year later, Omnislash also resurfaced, but despite Cloud's appearance being updated in line with the movie, Omnislash bore no real relation to what had been seen within Advent Children. Instead, it was quite vanilla, with Cloud performing multiple strikes as in the original Kingdom Hearts, just with a more exaggerated arc. The only major change was that a big downward strike had now been added to the end to tick off one of the more specific traits of Omnislash as a whole. The next significant appearance of Omnislash came within Dissidia Final Fantasy, a game that served as a tribute to everything that had come before when it released in 2008. Cloud played a prominent part in this, and his moveset was very faithful to what was seen within the original game, but it also incorporated elements from Advent Children. This meant that for the first time, Cloud was able to perform 2 base versions of Omnislash within the same experience. Of the 2, Omnislash version 5 was denoted as the lesser of the attacks, as it was classified as a bravery to HP attack that could be assigned after learning Slashing Blow. It was also a dumbed down version of what was seen within Advent Children, as while Cloud did still perform 6 strikes, ending with a big downward finale, it was done with just a single weapon. This then made room for the original Omnislash to appear as Cloud's EX burst, but unlike Omnislash version 5, it was expanded upon. This Omnislash could be performed after rapidly pressing circle to raise the limit meter, and if successful, Cloud would unleash 14 strikes before landing a devastating downward strike. The change was that this downward strike now hit 6 times as opposed to 1, which increased Omnislash to 20 strikes as opposed to 15. In another twist, should the player fail to fill up the limit meter, Cloud would perform a lesser version of Omnislash. This would only land 3 blows, with the final strike being upward instead of downward. In Advent Children Complete, as there was a significant expansion to the production, effort was placed on building out the final battle against Sephiroth. For this version, earlier on during the fight, Cloud attempted to use Omnislash as he had done many years before, but even after entering into his heightened state, Sephiroth anticipated the move and blocked Cloud's strikes before impaling him when he attempted the big downward strike at the end. Later in the fight, Cloud attempted Omnislash again, but after Sephiroth blocked the initial strike, Cloud chose to perform what has now become known within the fandom as Omnislash version 6. This was an expanded version of what was seen within the original Advent Children, as instead of striking once per sword, it now increased the number of strikes to 13, with a big downward strike at the end landing multiple times, something that had just been introduced within Dissidia. The next major outing for Omnislash appeared in Super Smash Bros. 4, but it resurfaced in similar fashion in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It was a devastating move, serving as one of the most powerful final smashes in the entire game. As we had seen many times before, this Omnislash could miss, but if it didn't, each successive strike dealt a higher percentage of damage. In the best case scenario, a successful Omnislash would land 17 strikes, and the big downward strike at the end would result in a huge explosion that would launch the opponent into the air, something which many would not be able to recover from. Such was the strength of this move that it was nerfed in Ultimate, with its knockback potential decreased and the launch angle of the final strike lessened, something that decreased its potential to KO. When Dissidia Arcade launched in 2015, Cloud was again at the forefront of everything relating to the game, but with EX Burst removed due to balancing issues, Omnislash was modified in a significant manner. It was repurposed as a standard HP attack, meaning it could now be performed without any special requirement at any time, you just had to unlock it. In its base state, it could only perform 5 strikes, but for the first time within Dissidia NT, Omnislash could be enhanced. If the player also used Cloud's Limit Break EX skill, Omnislash would have its range increased and the number of attacks would also be increased. And as was seen within the original Kingdom Hearts, Cloud would become invincible after the first strike landed. Omnislash then resurfaced a year later in World of Final Fantasy, where it could be unlocked as Cloud's summon ability. This would see Cloud inflict damage to a single enemy, and it was incredibly flamboyant from a visual perspective, combining elements of the original Omnislash with Omnislash version 5. But outside of the flash visuals, this version of Omnislash also struck its opponent more times than any other previous version of the move. In addition to having so many strikes, this iteration of Omnislash was also unique in that its use granted a strength boost to the party, which was a nice reference back to the original game where strength was the attribute which determined how much damage Omnislash did. The most recent iteration of Omnislash to evolve the concept has yet to appear, at least for those of us in the West, and that's because it appears within Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Within the Japanese version, burst moves have now been added, and at the end of Cloud's, he can perform Omnislash version 5. Much like what was seen within Advent Children, Cloud uses his fusion sword to strike his foe from multiple angles, but what's cool is that this version of Omnislash expands to also include what was seen within Advent Children Complete, as there is a big downward strike at the end that lands a load of additional hits. It made another unique variant of Omnislash, which was then bolstered by the introduction of splash damage for the first time. In the past, Omnislash either targeted a single enemy or cycled between various foes, but this version of Omnislash targeted a single enemy and dealt 20% of the total damage to any other enemy on the battlefield. Now, Omnislash has of course also appeared in many other properties over the years. Kingdom Hearts Recoded, for example, also combined elements of both the original Omnislash and version 5, while Theatrhythm had a rather muted appearance. Most, though, were faithful recreations of Omnislash from its original appearance within Final Fantasy VII. This was the case in Piclogica, where we got to see Omnislash performed with a more traditional art style, through to Final Fantasy Explorers, where Cloud could be used as a Magicite, and in Brave Exvius, where thanks to multiple versions of Cloud appearing, we got to see multiple versions of Omnislash appearing too, that were also faithful to their source material. And that's really cool, but what's also cool is the impact of Omnislash, to the point where other prominent ultimate moves in the franchise bear similarities. And there are two notable examples, the first of which was Army of One in Lightning Returns. This saw Lightning unleash a barrage of strikes from multiple angles, similar to Omnislash version 5, and it ended with a quintessential big downward strike. The other was Noctis' Armiger. Thanks to an update within the Royal Edition which upgraded it to Armiger Unleashed, this saw a new attack added called Legacy of the Lucii. This again drew from Omnislash version 5 to see Noctis performing multiple warp strikes before finishing the flurry off with a massive downward strike. It means Omnislash is omnipresent, but that marks the end of this particular study of evolution. It may not have been quite as traditional as some of the previous studies, but it does at least shine a light on how much Omnislash has changed over the years, and it makes us very curious to see how it's going to change in the years to come. Hopefully you guys have found the video interesting. If you did, then please do consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you have the time, be sure to let us know in the comments which has been your favourite version of Omnislash in the franchise so far. Alright guys, this is Daryl signing out. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.